Hi guys, Dark Aperture here, and today I'm back with a $400 game PC build. Now I made a $400 game PC build with the new AMD APUs, but someone pointed out that could get better configuration with an Intel Pentium G processor. So I listened, and he's right. I can get better configuration, and I'll just show you here. This is the parts list, and after this we're just gonna move on. Now, for the processor, I went with the Intel Pentium G 2020. Now, this performance for the price ratio on the CPU is out of this park. Surprising for an Intel processor, but you can overclock it. That's no big deal though, really. If you're just buying a $400 game PC, you're probably just getting into PC gaming, so you won't mind it too much. You're not exactly one of those people with his I'm a boss glasses on as he goes into the BIOS, which really isn't that something to brag about. You can also, since this is an Ivy Bridge processor and all motherboards with Ivy Bridge socket, LG1155 sockets and Ivy Bridge chipsets, you can just send them. You can just upgrade straight to the 3770K. Though since the B75 chipset won't overclock, you should get the 3770. Better price. It's also very low power consumption, all for $65, which is pretty awesome. Now for the RAM, I went some generic low profile Corsair 4GB DDR3 1333. Sure, it's not the best quality RAM, but it's good enough quality RAM that you can get by. It's a slow profile RAM. 4GB is enough for gaming. Some people don't believe this, but the most I've seen a game use, according to some benchmark tests I found from JZ2Cents, awesome guy, check him out by the way. The most you running a game will use on tasks on the memory is 3.6 gigs, so it is good enough. And DDR3 1333 is also fast enough for gaming. That's another thing some people would like to dispute, but unless you're using APU, RAM doesn't really matter. Well, RAM speed. RAM size doesn't matter, but not RAM speed. And this is only $25, so that's pretty good. Now for the motherboard, I went with the ASRock B75M DGS. Now sure, it's a cheaper motherboard, but that doesn't mean it's lacking on features. It's got quite a few PCI slots. It's got 2 RAM slots, got USB 3 and SATA 6. And it's got an LG1155 socket, so you won't be able to use Haswell Broadlow CPUs, but Ivy Bridge will be good enough for 4 more years, maybe 3 to 4 years, depends on how fast cores increase. Now, it's a $60 motherboard, and it's pretty good for that price. Now for the graphics card, I went with a Gigabyte GTX 650 Ti 1GB. Now this will definitely outperform an A10 1600K with a 6670, unlike some people believe again, but it's also very low price for a 650 Ti. It's $130, which puts in line with the much lower 7770. NVIDIA cards seem to be tricking down in price to meet the AMD cards they actually beat instead of going up against same price AMD cards that beat them. It's also got 1 gig of GDDR5, which is enough for gaming, and just a powerful card in gaming in general. Sure, it won't come with as many games as AMD cards do, but you can just buy the games later. And you still get Metro Last Light, if that deal isn't off already. All for $130, like I said. Now for the power supply, I went for Corsair CX430. 430 watts is enough for this build. Sure, you won't be able to get the biggest overclock, but then again, you can't even overclock, so it doesn't matter. It's also very important to get a reliable power supply. You can cheap out for a higher capacity, but it's going to stab you really hard in the back when your power supply craps out on you and fries 1 or 2 more parts in your system. Most likely one of those will be the board, since it's directly connected. It's also just not gonna stab you in the back in general, because the cost of replacing the motherboard and the power supply will be more than just purchasing a quality power supply in the first place, so don't do it. This is a $45 power supply anyway, and it'll get you by. Its capacity will get you by. Now for the hard drive, I was faced with a difficult decision. So should I keep the optical drive, or should I lower the HDD size, or lose the optical drive for 500 gigs? In the end, since the only time you ever need the optical drive really is just to copy a game onto your games onto your OS. Like, oh yeah, I mean, install your OS, and you can just have the USB stick anyway. And the fact that you could just purchase this as a $20 add-on later, I don't really consider that worth the loss of 180 gigs of storage. So I went for 500 gig Caviar Blue. It'll be around for a lot longer than a refurb 320 gig Blue. 7200 RPM is fast enough, like I said. And if you get Windows 8, boot times will be no problem for you. And by the way, if you get an OS, this build costs $510 versus $410. I'll be honest. The title will draw you in, and you'll find this cell, which might disappoint you, but dude, hardly any builders include the OS. No big deal. Now it's a $60 hard drive, and it's pretty good for that price. Now for the case, I cheaped out, like always with budget builds. I went for an Apex SK393C. This is one of the cheapest cases I could find that isn't paper thin cheap, but it's low price enough. It's not too cheap that it won't be usable, as in if you press the power button it'll explode, but it'll hold everything in this build. It's got decent ventilation. It's a pretty low price as well, which is pretty nice for $25. Now total price of the system is $410, $510 with the OS. $10 over budget is not a big deal. If you're paying $410, the difference between $400 and $410 is 2.5%. And that's not very big. Now, that's pretty much it for this video. Subscribe to Dark Aperture if you enjoyed, and goodbye, guys.